Good morning. Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos, Dalek Kesubos 54. We're going to start on the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, where the Gemara asks the following question: Bai Rebbe Elazar Bas Shnia Yesh Mazonos Eina or Mazonos. We've been discussing that the daughter of a marriage is part of the stipulation of the Ksuba. She's supported by the estate after the death of her father. But here we're talking about a case where the marriage was not kosher because he married a woman who was a secondary prohibition or rabbinic prohibition. Let's say the classic example is a grandchild with its grandmother. So now the question is, does the daughter of that union, is she required to support from the estate? Do we say that since under these circumstances, the marriage itself, she does not get a ksuba because we want the marriage to terminate. So therefore, the daughter from that marriage will also not get support. Or maybe we say, Elam Mizonos, do we say Yeshlam Mizonos, that the daughter gets support like every daughter? We have to take care of the kid on top of Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Or do we say Elam Mizonos, even though it's Ksuba? Or do we say no? Since the mother doesn't get Ksuba, the daughter doesn't get the Mizonos. So that's what the Gemara says on top of Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Even though it's Ksuba, Elam Mizonos. Dilma, or maybe we say Ima the Avda Isura, the mother, she did something wrong. Kinasua Rabbanan. Therefore, the sages penalized her. But Ihi de lo Avda Isura, but the girl herself, she didn't do something wrong. So therefore, well, Kinasua Rabbanan. Maybe the rabbis aren't going to penalize her. The rabbis leave this question unresolved. It could have also raised another thing. If he doesn't have another thing that the Gemara raised earlier by the case of Onis Mafata, this would be a case of Choten Niskar, that if he doesn't have to support her from the estate, his estate is going to grow. And so this is the case where, because he did a mistake, he's going to benefit from it. He doesn't have to support her. It's a case of Choten Niskar. Gemara didn't raise that as a question now. Bai Rabba. So Rabba now asked the following question. Bas Arusa Yesh Lamazonos or Ein Lamazonos. So now we're talking about a case where a person has relations with a woman who's an Arusa. He's betrothed her. Some say this is a rabbinic prohibition, some say it's a biblical prohibition. Dispute amongst the Rishonim. So he has relations with this Arusa, and as a result, she gives birth to a child, and then she gives birth to a daughter, and then he dies, and he has other sons. So do we say that this girl will get supported by the estate or not? Do we say keeping the Isla Ksuva? Isla, since she has a Ksuva, because the Arusa, Rash explains, he wrote her a Ksuva from the Erisin. He wrote her a Ksuva from the moment of betrothal. Even though they're not allowed to have relations yet, he still wrote her a Ksuba. Or maybe the rabbis itself instituted a Ksuba also from the moment of the Erusin. So she has a Ksuba even though they're not allowed to be together. So therefore, maybe since she has a Ksuba, the daughter gets Mizonos. Or maybe since the rabbi said that really the Ksuba happens from the time of the full marriage. So that's when it's written down. So therefore, until the time of the Nisuin is a stipulation of the Ksuva. So therefore, the stipulations of the Ksuva, like the idea that you need to support the daughter, they also don't apply. So that's the Gemara's question. Gemara says, take it. We leave that question unresolved. Next question. Vaira Papa Bas Anusa. Let's say you assaulted a woman, Rahmano Atzlan. And then this woman who was assaulted, we know that you're required to marry her, and you have to pay the father 100 silver coins. So this Bas Anusa, the daughter of that woman who he assaulted, Yesh Lamazonos, Oelam Mazonos, does she get support or not? Do we say Aliba the Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Oti Bailach? According to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, This is not a question, because what did Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda said? He said, Yesh la ksuba money. He says, I don't care that you already gave her a ksuba. I don't care that you already gave her silver coins. You still have to pay her a ksuba. He says, you're still going to have to pay her the monetary payout. But kiti bayla chaliba de Rabbanan. It's only a question going to Rabbanan who say yatsa kesef kenasa biksuvasa. The Rabbanan say, you already gave her the money when you paid her father for the anusa, and so therefore when she was assaulted, and so therefore according to Rabbanan, there's no ksuba here. Do we say kivan the waisla ksuba waisla? Since there's no ksuba here, she doesn't get the support. Adoma ksuva, or maybe the reason why she doesn't get the ksuba, time of my today, because we don't want to make it easy for her to be divorced. In this case, he specifically can't divorce her. That's the only reason why she doesn't get the ksuba, but she's still entitled to support for her daughter. So take it. We leave this question unresolved. Again, we could have said this case of chote niskar, because now he's benefiting. He assaulted her, and now he doesn't have to pay for her daughter's support. The Gemara says, what about the phrase that we said in our Mishnah that he says to the wife when he marries her, Ata yesvu bebesi, you could stay in my home all the days where you are widowed. That's what he says as part of the ksuba, meaning to say that until he pays off the ksuba, she's entitled to support from the estate. So Tani Rav Yosef says, the language is you could stay in my house, bebesi, bikasi. You could stay in my house, but not in my bikasi. Bikasi is like a shack. Meaning to say it has to be a house, not a shack. Of a mezoni isla. But if he doesn't have a house, she doesn't get to stay there. She only gets to stay in the house, but not in the shack. But nevertheless, he still has to provide her with support. That's what Rav Yosef says, where the state still needs to provide her with support. So Mar Baravash, he says no. If the husband doesn't have a house, he doesn't have to give her support either. The law is not like Mar Baravashi. Amar Nachman Amar Shmuel. So yeah, Rav Nachman taught in the name of Shmuel, Tavuoli Nase. Let's say after she was a widow, somebody else wants to come along and marry her. Vinit Vaisa, she accepts, even though she's not married yet, she accepts, meaning she's planning on moving out of the house. From the point where she accepted, she does not entitled to support from the estate anymore, because it says as long as you remain as my widow. But at the moment she decides to move on, she's not remaining as the widow. So we see from here, if she wants to marry somebody else, she doesn't get supported. So the Gemara asks, you mean to say alon et faisa yesh lamazonas? Meaning to say, let's say she wants to get married, but she hasn't found a good shidduch. Then we're going to say she gets mizonos. Amar Ravanan, indeed, with Gemara doesn't like that. Gemara is assuming that the moment she decides to look onward, she shouldn't get mizonos anymore. Amar Ravanan didi mefarshele mine demar Shmuel. Ravanan said, to me it was explained the teachings of Mar Shmuel, and Amra, and she said, Machmas ploni bali. That what did Shmuel say? Shmuel's position was Tavuli Nasev in Spice. Shmuel said the moment she was agreed, she doesn't get the money anymore, the support anymore. So he says, I was explaining the teachings of Shmuel. Amra Machmas ploni bali yesh lamazonas. If she said, I don't want to marry you because I'm still a widow, then basically she gets support. But if she says, but if she says, listen, I don't want to marry you because I just don't like the way you look, whatever reason, I'm not feeling it, well, then she doesn't get the support. And Amar Rav Chisda taught Zinta that if she has a sexual encounter while she's a widow, then Isla, she's still going to get the mizonos. My time, and what's the reason? Yetzer ansa. Because we're going to say, look, that's not an indication she doesn't want to be a widow anymore. It's just an indication that she had a moment of weakness. But I skipped a line. So he says, Amar Chasazinta, Engla Mazonos. Amar Yosef, Kichla Upirchasa. Yosef says, actually, if she puts on the makeup, the eyeliner, the blush, that's when she doesn't get the Mazonos, because that's she's showing she's getting out, she's ready to go dating. Mandamar Zinta, the one who says that if she has Zinus, then she loses her Mazonos. Kol Shekain Kichol Pirchasa, for sure if she starts putting on makeup, because that requires intentionality, and it shows that it wasn't just a moment of weakness. Mandamar Kichol Pirchasa, but the one who says that she loses her Ksuba only if she puts on the makeup, Avol Zinta Isla. But if she has the Zinus, then she would would remain getting the support. My time Yainsar Ansa. We're going to say that the only reason why she had this news was she had a momentary weakness, but she's not ready to move out of the house and say she's no longer a widow. And the law is not like any of these teachings. The teaching is like Rabbi Yehuda taught in the name of Shmuel, who says that that somebody who once the girl or the widow asks for her ksuva in the court, that's the moment where she does not get support anymore. She has to make the claim that I want my ksuva. Gemara says, "Velo, is that really the case? Is it really the case that once a woman comes along and makes a claim for the ksuba in the court, she loses her ksuba? Is that really the case? But then we learn machar ksuba. So let's say she sold her ksuba, mishkina ksuba, or let's say she used her ksuba as a deposit, or asta ksuba apoteki. She made her ksuba apoteki la'acher, meaning to say, she says to her creditor that when you were going to collect my debt, you collect it specifically from this piece of land. Then when she does any of those three items, then she showed that the ksuba is now, she's moved on and she's using the ksuba just to raise money, basically. So she's not remaining as the widow. But hani in those three cases, yes, but doesn't that take away from the case that you said in the name of Shmuel, that she loses the ksuba only when she makes the claim for it in court? The Gemara says, well, hani bein bebezdin bein shelo bezdin. Those other cases, she loses the ksuba whether she's in the court or she's out of the court. Tovas bebezdin in shelo bebezdin lo. But the when she makes a claim for the ksuba, then she only loses it if she's in the court but not outside the court. Then the Mishnah recorded a dispute between the practice in Jerusalem versus the practice in Judah. The practice in Jerusalem and the Galilee, Mishnah said, was that the heirs could buy her out of the ksuba and then they could stop their support. Whereas in Judah, they did not allow that. So in Rav Amar Halacha Ka'anshei Yehuda, Rav says the law is like the people of Yehuda, that they could buy her out. Shmuel Amar Halacha Ka'anshei Galil, that Shmuel says the law is like the men of the Galilee, that they can't. In Babylon and all its surrounding suburbs, they ruled like Rav that they can buy her out. Nardai v'chol parvadeh no k'Shmuel. In Nardai and all of its surrounding areas, they ruled like Shmuel. So Ahibas Mechuza, there was a girl from Mechuza, from Rav's area, Davis Nasibo in Nardai. She was married to Nardayan. Also coming to Rav Nachman. So she came before Rav Nachman and she basically said, I don't want them to buy me out. But Shama Lakola, Rav Nachman heard her voice. Debas Mechuza, he heard she's from Mechuza, Amar Lahu. So he said to the people, Baba Chol Parvadeh, now Karav. Well, you follow the practice of Rav, and so therefore he could buy her out of the Ksuba. Amar Lei, Nardai Nasiba. But she said, but I got married to a Nardayin. And so therefore, says, if you marry into a Nardayan, well, then the halacha is like Shmuel. And so what's the reason the law is like Shmuel? Because you're supposed to follow the man's custom when you get married. And so we see from here, this is the source for the idea that when a woman enters into marriage, her personal customs that relate to the marriage, or relate to both of them, she's supposed to adopt the man's customs. So the Gemara says, At what point is the boundaries of what's considered nardai? The point where they use the measurements of nardai. That's how you could tell. In Mar Almana, what about a widow? How do we determine when you pay her out a ksuba? Rav Amar Shaman Mashallah. Rav says when you say, like, when the assets, you include all her assets, including the clothes she wears, when you pay out her ksuba to her. You include that as money you've already given her. Whereas Shmuel says, ain't Shaman Mashallah. No, you don't include the clothes she's wearing. She already acquired those clothes. She already owns them. It's not part of the ksuba. It's the opposite by a hired worker. When you send him out and you pay off his wages, and he was working for you in the house, you clothed him. Well, do you include those clothing in the final calculations? So I guess today this might be like the points on your credit card to travel, or your travel points. Now, who keeps that, the company or the person? So Rav Kahana Masni V'chein B'Laket. Rav Kahana said, actually, no, it's the same law. They keep the same positions by the worker. Umanach Basimana, and he gave a sign, a mnemonic, Yasma V'Malta Shaloch V'Pok. That was the way to remember it. The orphan and the widows send out and go out. Even though we have a Mishnah like Shmuel, even though we have a teaching like Shmuel, even though we have a teaching like Shmuel who says that we don't calculate what's upon her, the law is like Rav, that the law is going to be like Rav, that we do calculate what is upon her. So the Tanan, we learned, somebody consecrates all their property to the temple, or somebody says, I'm going to give my value to the temple. The treasurer cannot come and take back the clothing of his wife or the clothing of his children, or he cannot also collect the dyed garments, not the new shoes that he bought for them. Meaning to say that once these clothing went on them, they're no longer the husband, they belong to the wife, and therefore the treasurer can't take them. So we see you don't calculate the clothing when you give out the ksuba because she already acquired that. So Gemara says, since we have an explicit mission like Shmuel, why do you say the law is like Rav, that we do calculate it? So the Gemara explains, he says, really, Shmuel's position was, at first glance, that we don't calculate it. But when you look at it closely, you'll say, that the law is like Rav, who says that you calculate the clothing. My timer. What's the reason why he gave it to her? He gave her the clothes for her to wear with him. I didn't give her the clothes, so now I'm divorcing you and I'm dressing you like, to the nines. No, that's not what's going on. And so therefore, really the law is like Rav, that you calculate the clothes she's wearing as part of the severance payment. There was a daughter-in-law in the house of Yashav. Her husband had died, and she wanted the ksuba from the heirs. So she was bringing them to court to get full payment of her ksuba. So they said to her, we don't, it's disrespectful to us for you to go to the court dressed, like in your rags. So she went and she dressed herself in clothes which actually equal the full value of the ksuba. She dressed very fancily. She had very fancy clothes. Also coming to Ravina. So then they came to Ravina. He said, well, guess what? The law is like Rav. It says for the widow, we calculate what's upon her. And so therefore, for this reason, they don't owe you anything anymore. So now we have another case. Somebody says, Nedunya lebrat. This nedunya is going to go to my daughter. This dowry is going to go to my daughter. The dowry was an object, not necessarily money, but the value of the object went down. He was giving her the object, but the value went down. Zal Dunya. So Amar Avidi Bar Avin Porno Yasmi, the heirs get the benefit. We assume he was giving her the object and not the value of the object. And so since the object went down in value, the orphans don't have to make it up. We're now on the top of 54. 54b. Yehuda Amaru Arba Mezuze Min Chamra Legras. I'm giving 400 zuz worth of wine. Meaning to say, Rashi says this wine, that's 400 zuz of wine. That's a collateral or a lien for your ksuva. But the wine itself, he didn't say to give her. He just said the value of that wine. Yakar Chamra, then the wine went up in value. So does he have to give her the more wine? So Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Chol Yasmi. No, he doesn't. The orphans make up the difference. The orphans they gain the difference. It's to their gain. Krivi de Rabbi Yochanan, the relatives of Rabbi Yochanan, Havilahu Isas Abba. They had a woman who was married to their father. She ate a lot of food, and not only that, Raj says she ate a lot, but she did it in a way that was wasteful. So also coming to Rabbi Yochanan, so they came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Lahu, Rabbi Yochanan said to them, he's giving them advice. How do you deal with this fact? The father was still alive, so they were worried she's going to eat them out of the house once he died. They wouldn't be able to support her. So what happened? Rabbi Yochanan said, he said, go tell your fathers, said, go designate a piece of land to support her, just one specific land. That way she'll have a budget. Also, coming to Reish Lakish, they came before Reish Lakish. So he said just the opposite. If when you do this, you've given her extra support. Why? You're giving her the full support plus that property. Rabbi Yochanan didn't say that. Why are you saying that? He says, he said to them, go give her the extra money. If you don't do that, I'm going to rip Rabbi Yochanan out of your ears. Also, coming to Rabbi Yochanan, they came back to Rabbi Yochanan. They told him what's transpiring. Reish Lakish ruled against him. He said that the widow is entitled to the land and the regular support, the value from the land, the dividends of the land, and the regular support. So he said, so Rabbi Yochanan said, Maya said, what can I do? My peers argued against me. We know that Rabbi Yochanan was Reish Lakish's brother-in-law, and they were chavrusas. But really, Rabbi Yochanan was the Rebbe, because he taught Reish Lakish. But nevertheless, he says that my peers argued against me. So, Amar Rabbi Avola, the Dim Farshale Mine Rabbi Yochanan. He said, to me was taught the teachings of Rabbi Yochanan, and I understand like this. Amar Limizonos, let's say he says, I'm giving you this food for support, this land for support, Ribo or Mizonos. Then it's the regular support plus this property. Amar Bimizonos, but if he said I'm giving to him bit, which is like in place of Mizonos, Katatz Mizonos. Well, then he has made a specific place for support, and that's from the land. Now, we have completed this fourth chapter. We go into the fifth chapter of Mesachas Kesubos, which is called the chapter of Perek Afal Pi. So, Afal Pi Shamru Besua Gova Masayim, even though they said that a virgin girl collects 200 Amana and the widow collects only 100. Imratza Hosif, if the man wants to add on, even if he wants to add on 100 silver coins, Yosef, he can add them on. He can add on whatever he wants. This Armo and this Garsha, let's say she was widowed or divorced, from either the Rusin or the Nisuin. Gova Esakol, she collects the Ksuba plus the additional parts of the Ksuba. This is called the Tosefes Ksuba. We're going to learn a lot about this in tomorrow's daf. Whereas, but Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, if she became widowed or divorced only from the betrothal, then she doesn't collect the Tosefes Ksuba. She doesn't collect the additional part. Then Besula Gova Masayim V'Amana Mana. Then the Besula gets 200 and the widow 100 because he only married her with the intent, so he only wrote it for her with the intent to fully marry her. And since he didn't fully marry her, she's not going to be entitled to the Tosefes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Imratza Kotsev Lebesua Shtar Shamasayim. Rabbi Yehuda says if he wants, he can write for the virgin a contract of 200. Vihi Kosebes is Kabalti Min, and she could say, well, I've already received 100 from you. She could basically waive her rights. And she could waive her right and say, I already collected 50 for a widow, meaning to take half. Rabbi Meir says, no. Rabbi Meir says, we had this dispute already. We had it already back 3 days ago, so hopefully people still remember it. And the mayor says, no, if you give them less than what they're entitled to, then the standard amount of the ksuba, then it's like you are engaging in lewd behavior, because the whole purpose of the ksuba is to make it difficult to divorce, or make the husband realize it's onerous to divorce. So that's the reason. So therefore, if she lowers the amount, then she's engaging in bi'uasnas. So the Gemara says, well, Pshita, of course you can give her a Tosefes Ksuba, you can give her an additional part of the Ksuba. What are you adding on to this? That he's allowed to give her extra money? You can always give extra money to whoever you want. No, the Gemara says, Ma'odetema Kitsusa Abdu Rabbanan. You might have thought that this is a specific amount, that you don't want to embarrass somebody who doesn't have the money for a Ksuba. So therefore you want to make it a specific amount to everybody. So we say, no, Kamash Shmuel, we don't say that this is a gift, and you can give whatever amount you want as a gift. There are a lot of places where the Chachamim said, we don't want to embarrass somebody who doesn't have it. Here we don't say that. We don't say that here. But there are other cases, like for example, I guess the most famous example is that that the Benot Yisrael, we have Yom Kippur coming up. We're now in Chodesh Elul. We learned at the end of Maseches Tainis Chaf Vav Beis. We just learned this recently about Tu B'Av, that the Benot Yisrael, the daughters of Israel, go out on Yom Kippur on the 15th of Av with white garments that were borrowed, so as not to embarrass Shelo Avayish Es Misha Inlo. So that was an example of where we also use this phrase, that we acted a certain way, so not to embarrass somebody who doesn't have. So we might have thought we did that here, but we don't. But in the end, we don't say that. Okay. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them.